Welcome to REI Unite. I'm your host, Ryan Polakaitis, and I'm here with a very special guest, Gabe Dasilva. Gabe is the founder and president of Dasilva Group Incorporated, a group of privately held real estate investment and development companies that specialize in residential development in New Jersey. Thanks for being on the show, Gabe.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, so you have quite the diverse background. Before we jump right into expansion development, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate investment?
So in a past life, as a finance guy, I worked in corporate finance and financial services for almost 10 years out of undergrad. And after a series of layoffs, kind of left my head spinning. I decided to scratch the entrepreneurial itch. And actually, I was in the food business for just under 5 years. Recently sold out of that and started in real estate full time. Been at this for about 2 years.
Okay. Well, that's quite a variety of a background there. So let me ask you, you mentioned that also previously that your father is a builder, and that's kind of what got you started and kind of, I guess you were saying subconsciously set in things that you picked up, lingo, et cetera, that probably plays a big part into how you got started into going this route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's always been kind of the natural progression was for me to wind up in the real estate investment business. My dad was a builder, and so for the 30 plus years I've been around, I've been listening to and watching things happen in and around real estate, and not necessarily internalizing those things. I mean, that stuff doesn't really resonate with you as a kid, but then you start doing something like this full time. And you realize like you speak the language and you look at a blueprint and it's not Latin to you. Like some of those things make sense to you. And obviously I continue to learn every day, but I have that background. Subconsciously, I picked up a whole lot more as a kid than I thought I had, just being around it. But what we do now, I mean, is very much different from what guys have done in the real estate investment game for the last however many years. The stuff you're seeing happen now, especially with the advent of technology, and it's just a very, very different game now.
Exactly. And having a computer background, that's one thing that I've noticed when I first got into it. A lot of the agents and other investors really weren't utilizing technology. Mm-hmm. And I felt that kind of gave me a little bit of an advantage having that background and be able to incorporate IT into my real estate business.
Yeah.
So for those that missed the previous episode with Mario Camino, where we touched base on expansion development, for those that don't know, that are brand new listeners, why don't you explain a little bit about what expansion development is?
Well, so our version of it is very niche, very different. What we do, and I know that Mario does a lot of the same things, and there's a bunch of guys out here that are doing it too. What we do is we take single family residential, primarily dated capes and ranches in a specific area, and we go up with them. We do add levels. So we try and double the footprint of an existing house in markets where it's warranted, where the upside is there. So it's a very niche type of real estate investing, because you're looking for a specific kind of product that you can do a specific thing to and ultimately get a number for. So that's our version of expansion and development. And that's our bread and butter. Along with that, we're constantly evolving, just like every business should be. And we're doing things like ground up spec builds, and ultimately going to move into stuff, mixed use stuff, things like that. But the bread and butter, what got us to where we are and what we specialize in, is single family residential at levels in the better half of Union County specifically.
Right. Excellent. So, very great points. And, one of the ones that you mentioned is building, taking capes or ranches as prospects that you can expand upon. So mm-hmm. What are some other key factors that when you determine, okay, this is going to make a good candidate? Obviously, you named two styles of houses that you like to expand on. What are some other factors that are going to say, okay, this one makes sense to put on another level?
Mm-hmm. Well, with adding a second floor on, you're essentially creating a new building on top of an older building. And you can't exactly have a 1960s first floor and a 2015 second floor. You have to gut the entire house. So what we're looking for when we go in, we're looking for something that hasn't been touched, something that hasn't been updated since it was built. We don't want to be paying for the updated kitchen that they put in 2004. I mean, we want the house to not have been touched since we go in and we gut everything anyway. We do all new mechanicals. What we essentially wind up saving is the foundation. Everything from there up is new. So that's what we look for. We look for something old, something that hasn't been taken very good care of, something beat up. And then a lot of it has to do with how the specific house sits on the lot. Because like we said, we're throwing a second floor on. That's essentially a new building on top of an old building. So the first floor may be grandfathered in, but the second floor is considered a new structure. So there's a lot of issues with zoning and ordinances and setbacks and things that you have to look at. A lot of really nuanced stuff that's very town specific. So that's something we look at too. And then just we don't buy flood and we don't buy oil tanks, and that's about it. Anything else, I think construction wise, we can address during the rehab. So nothing else really scares us. A strong foundation is obviously important since we're building up from there. But beyond that, we'll buy anything. The more beat up, the better. We love older houses.
So let me ask you this. So you have, let's just say your ranch, right? That you guys say, okay, this is a good prospect. It meets our guidelines to expand upon. Now, when you go and you gut the entire downstairs floor, are you removing that down to the studs? Are you removing the studs? Are you reframing things? I mean, how does that transpire? What, is that bottom floor in essence eliminated except a couple of a few studs that you're saying that this is existing? I'm sure there's some regulations that the towns require. I mean, I've seen driving the neighborhood sometimes just one wall standing from a complete house that's been demoed, and I'm guessing that's probably to get around certain issues of saying, hey, this is going to get grandfathered in by keeping this one wall here or something to that effect. Exactly.
That's our motto right there. We just when you start digging, when you start opening up walls and stuff, because people don't want to live in houses in the 1960s style house with closed off rooms, right? Everybody's looking for open floor plan now, especially the shared living space on the first floor. So none of those walls, especially internally, make any sense. They all have to go. And then you start looking at the outside and you're talking about a 60-year-old house. Like, there's tons of water damage. Those exterior walls usually aren't salvageable. But like you said, you leave up the one and you work from there, you work around that. And so you're grandfathered in. The first floor, that existing structure is still grandfathered in. And the whole second floor is considered a new building. So yeah, we rarely save anything. I mean, to be honest, I've had houses where we've saved 24 or 26 studs on the first floor. That was the extent of what was salvaged. Gotcha. So everything else was new.
Right. So you also mentioned that it's very town specific as far as what requirements are for setbacks, what's grandfathered in, et cetera. So obviously that plays a big part during your prospecting stage of when you're evaluating these properties. Is it going to make sense? What am I going to encounter with this town, et cetera? So what is part of your due diligence process? Is that just calling the construction department and saying, hey, I'm looking to buy this house on 123 Main Street. This is our plans. What would be required? And what is that, what, I guess you could fill in the blanks as far as what
zoning, right? Like you have to get a hold of the zoning official and find out what specifically they are willing to tolerate in that given town. The ordinances are all online. So we've got every town that we're active in, we've got copies of all the ordinances in the office. And when a lead comes in, we'll take a look. Usually you'll need a survey to know where a house sits on a lot, what it's looking like side yard setbacks wise, front yard setbacks wise. And then you just kind of take a look at that and put that alongside the ordinances and see what you can actually do on that specific lot with that specific house. What I found a lot of times is that we do a lot of that due diligence up front before we go and write an offer, and later find out we can't do what we intended to do with the house. Right. Our ARV is shot, like everything's off. We'll do the legwork up front and we'll write offers, and then we'll find out we're outbid because the guy that wrote the offer, another builder who's going in on the house, envisioning doing the exact same thing we're doing, but didn't do his legwork, comes to find out that he can't go straight up with the house because there aren't 7 feet on the left side. He'll encroach on the side yard setback.
Right.
So we're kind of proactive in that regard. We don't want to waste our time, waste our realtor's time.
Sure.
So, and that's why we put a lot of time and effort into creating like the database of town specific ordinances. We have the zoning officials and the people in the office. We know who we can call when we have a specific question about a specific property and how it's zoned and what we can do there.
Excellent. Um, so let me ask you this. I have particularly a property at the end of my street that it's a HUD-owned property that's actually currently off the market, but when it hits the market again, I plan on trying to purchase it again. Tiny little ranch, probably from the 40s or 50s, would make a perfect little rental, but also would make a nice flip. However, the neighboring house put on, they bought a smaller house at one point and put on that extra level, and I'm thinking, okay, this might make sense for this particular house. I think you maximize your value by putting on that extra level. However, I have no idea of, I've never done it before, but that aside, I'm trying to see, does it make sense to go that route, or would it make sense to keep the house itself and just do a quick rehab, keep the structure as is, don't put on the extra level, put it back on the market, first time home buyer, be done with it. So I'll take an analogy with like my wholesaling business. So if I wholesale a property, I'll look at it and say, okay, does it make sense to make a quick nickel or a slow dime? Okay, if I go ahead and wholesale this out, I can make 10,000, or I could rehab it and make 20. I'd say, you know what, maybe I'll take the 10 now instead of worrying about months down the road getting, the 20,000. If I say, well, I can make 5,000 wholesale or 40,000 later on in a rehab, I'd rather probably make the 40 grand on the rehab. So similar with this situation, I'd like to know, okay, how am I going to determine, does it make sense to go ahead and put that other level on? If I'm going to put that other level on and I'm not going to get that return on investment, why bother, kind of thing. So when you're evaluating this, how do you determine if that would make sense to put that another level on, expand, etc., versus just fixing it up as is and making your quick dollar?
So we've done enough ADA levels now where we know what we're likely to spend based on the existing footprint of the house. Like a wider ranch, a deeper house is going to warrant obviously more framing, more drywall, more everything. So that house is going to cost you more than one of those salt box capes, those like 24 by 32 capes that you can go straight up with. So we know what we're likely to spend on each house. I think we've spent anywhere from about 125 to 175 grand on an ADA level. So we know we're going to be somewhere in there. So take what you think you're going to get it for, what you intend to spend, and then what your ARV is. So the ARV is huge. It's very town specific. In some towns, it doesn't make sense to go up in like Union County, like in Union, for example. We've looked at capes that you could have gone up with, and nothing in the area. There's no comps in the area that warrant going up with it. So right. why go in? Why go spend that 125, 135K to go up with that little cape when nobody else has done it? You never want to be the first one doing it anyway. So we look for them in towns where there's already some proven comps where we know we can get our number, and we always try and work out 6-figure flips. It's kind of the math. We try and make sure there's 6 figures of upside in an ADA level. And when you're essentially doubling the footprint of a house to the tune of the 125 to 175K, whatever the number works out to, somewhere in there. So it's not, I guess at this point, we've done enough of them where we're comfortable with the numbers. And I think that's the reason that I like this model so much, is because there's so many barriers to entry. You have to be comfortable with the construction piece of it, for one, and then you have to be liquid enough to be able to be able to rehab the property too. And at the end of the day, it's very, like we said, it's town specific. We only operate in the better half of Union County because those are markets where we know ADA levels make sense. And now we're getting into tear downs, doing ground up spec builds, and that's a whole different animal, but kind of the same thing. You got to be in towns where it makes sense to pay $250 for something just to rip it down, to spend $250 to build something to ultimately sell it. So it's all about the numbers and just being really comfortable with where you are, what you're spending, and what you'll ultimately be able to get for what you put there.
Now, when you're doing expansion building, is it roughly similar cost to new construction? I've never done new construction, but I'm told it's really like 90 to 110, give or take, per square foot. Is that what you could expect with new construction, or is there additional cost because of something, or is it a little less because of something?
No, those are good numbers. We build at the bottom end of that. Those are our numbers. I've seen numbers higher than that. Most are higher than that. So I think we're doing a new ground up spec build in Cranford right now, and we're at about 90 a square foot. And I think I spend less on ADA levels because we salvage the utilities, the foundation. Structural concrete is a huge expense when you go ground up. So when you take an attic level, you're really pocketing a ton of that. So I haven't really sat down and done the math. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is per square foot on these attic levels, but I know it's better than it is for new construction, obviously.
Right. Well, and I know I could see the emails coming in already, and not to get too technical, but when you're evaluating, let's just say your typical flips or wholesale deals, a general rule of thumb, they usually use the 65 cents on the dollar minus repairs. I've heard as far as with new construction that people have split it up into thirds, saying, okay, a third is going to go towards the acquisition, a third is going to go towards building, and a third is going to go for profit, in which case we have to buy the lot at about a third of our ARV if we're doing like new construction or something. If somebody's evaluating, for expansion development, somebody that's looking to get into this and they're inspired by this podcast and they're taking the next step, what kind of, what's like a general rule of thumb? I mean, it sounds like it's kind of specific to numbers that you're looking to make and you kind of work backwards from there, but do you use any general formula that might set as a guide for some of our listeners that are looking to get into this, or maybe they're in this but it can kind of help them along the way?
All the rules of thumb, those standards you just listed, those are all great places to start. What I find and what I think is our competitive advantage is that a lot of people buy according to those rules of thumb, and they don't take into account the nuanced stuff that I was just talking about. And that's where we can step in. I mean, I know that I can build cheaper than most anybody else in this market, so I can afford to pay up for a property if I have to. When someone's using the 65% rule, or they're splitting up new construction projects a third, and trying to do the math that way, and they stick to that because that's what they are comfortable with, they're at a disadvantage because there are all those little nuanced things we're talking about. And is someone doing their first attic level going to know all that? No. I mean, they have to buy according to those rules of thumb. They have to be comfortable with those numbers. They have to factor in contingencies. We don't. We just, at this point, we know what we're likely to spend on something, so we don't even bother with contingencies. And that's something, 5% contingency on a $150,000 rehab is real money. And if I can offer that much more on a property than you can, I'm going to get it.
Right. And you have that ability, why? Just because you already have an established relationship with your contractors, or you own your own equipment, or? It's the system too, because, if you sat down and you thought about what you could do with the ranch at the end of your street, and you said, well, I'm going to rehab this and I'm going to just flip it to a first-time home buyer, and then I'm going to sit there and say, well, in the amount of time it's going to take you to do that, because I have a system in place, I can throw a second floor on and I can double the square footage and really force appreciation. I can really add value to that property and get 100K more. Like, my ARV will be that much better. Right. That's where I think what differentiates us from other people and guys that are doing what I'm doing at this scale now is they've got a system in place. They have timelines. They stick to their budget. They stick to their timeline. They roll their guys in and out of the project in a timely fashion, so there's no lost days, which is a huge thing for us too. When you're doing projects of this scale, like, a lost day is huge, and we borrow hard money too. So, right. Your debt service is costing, taxes, lost days are huge for us. So we try and avoid that when possible. Right. So let me ask you this: what's involved with like the real estate, the expansion development, as far as, do you have engineers on staff at all times? Or you just outsource per deal, or do you do this yourself, or? Oh man, can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, your video froze. Is mine good? You're good now, yeah. You're frozen. Am I? I guess we'll give it a sec. I could ask you that question again, not a big deal. Because we're not going to redo everything. We're good. There's a lot of good content so far. I'm looking at my modem. So far, we're still full. I'll give it maybe a minute. Did it unfreeze for me? I could try to stop my camera and restart it. Let's try. You're moving around now a little bit. It's coming back. It. Yeah, I got full. Am I good? I restarted the camera. You're a little grainy, but I'm okay here and I'm recording, so I think we're all right.
It's good. You're gonna have to do like time stops and figure out where to cut and where to come back.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I said, it's a rough thing, but yeah, I'm okay. So let's make sure to see if this is really. Oh, it's still recording. Oh, I guess it didn't pause. So I guess we'll. Okay, a little technical difficulties, but so we're back. So what exactly is involved with like expansion development? Does this require engineers are on board with you as far as like do you have an engineer that is on your team, or is it just outsourced per job, or is this something that you do? You have a background, is something your father does? What professionals are required when you're dealing with these expansion developments, et cetera?
Architects and engineers. That's the one thing you wouldn't need if you're doing cosmetic rehabs. You're going and doing kitchens and baths. It's pretty straightforward. If you're not moving walls, you don't need an architect or an engineer to come in. But with what we do, when we get something under contract, we're about to buy a property and we have however long we have until close. While we're working on getting the financing in place, we're already reaching out to our architects and our engineer and getting them out to the site so they can spec out the property and figure out what we can actually do there. After we've done our front end research and made sure zoning wise we can do what we intend to do there, we bring them in for the design piece of it.
Right.
So we're trying to run things in parallel. So by the time we close on a property, we've already spent a good, I'd say probably about $5,000 on architecturals and engineering. And if we're really ripping, we've got renderings in the works. We know what we're going to put there before we even close on it.
Sure.
We visually can see what's going to be there before we even buy it. And then once we buy it and we take possession, we have to get permits in right away. And that's, that stuff that's town specific. So you could be waiting a week or two in some town and, waiting 2 months in another. And if you're borrowing hard money, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Right.
So everything, it's all about, if I had to say what's the key and how can we do this? How do we do what we do? How does this model work? I think a lot of it has to do with milestones and sticking to this timeline and making sure that things are happening in parallel. You're never just waiting for one thing to happen so you can go on to the next. You have to have things in the works.
Right. Time is money, especially like you said, when you're paying hard money costs, those will definitely add up.
Yeah, I try not to do it anymore. But early on, I would do the math and figure out what my holding costs were by the day. So
it might drive you nuts.
It drives you crazy. You show up on site and something's not happening. You're expecting to see guys on site and they're not there. That's $160 that day.
Yeah.
You think about it like that. It really makes you. It helps you really stick to that like no loss days approach to the rehab.
Sure.
So
okay. Just for our listeners that are intrigued by this, so let's just say you closed on a property. I guess what transpires as far as like the events. So for example, like when we close on a rehab, we send our guys in. They obviously demo, throw everything out, put in the dumpsters, etc. And then once that's done, they're just starting on fixing things. Get the permits applied as soon as we're approved. Boom, they're in there. Just pretty straightforward. Expansion development, obviously, in some cases, you're cutting the top part of the house off. It's exposed to the elements. So what's kind of a general play-by-play, so to speak? Like, okay, you closed on it today, and you have your approvals and everything. The actual manual labor involved, I guess.
Yeah, the front end of it looks like someone brings us the deal. We agree on price and terms, we sign a contract. As soon as that part's done, our rehab milestone template is activated. And we track all this in tracking software called Track with Ease. And in there, we start taking action immediately. We just sign the contract goes into the attorneys so we can start attorney review. While that's happening, like in parallel with that, we're engaged and getting the site so we can start getting drawings in place. That stuff's happening while they're in attorney review. As we come out of attorney review, our hope is that all that other stuff is ready and we can submit for permits. While permits are going through the review process with the town, in most towns, you can do interior demo. So you're not losing another week or two. You're having guys clean out the inside of the house. A lot of times you're buying hoarder houses, you're buying houses that are beat to shit inside. So there's a lot of interior demo that can be done.
Sure.
So we'll do that. And as soon as you get the green light from the town, you rip the roof off. And that's when you really start construction. I mean, and up to that point, you're basically just doing a lot of soft stuff and cleaning up. But as soon as you get the green light from the town, you come in, your framers rip the roof off, and they start framing your second floor.
Gotcha. And so as far as, I was always intrigued by that. When I see these houses that are half construction, you have a day like today that's raining and stuff like that. I mean, that doesn't affect the materials or the interior of the house itself. I mean, the fact that it could be pouring out and there's no roof on the house and you have all that wood's exposed, that doesn't have any negative effects or anything, or...
A day or two doesn't change anything, but what I found is we've had it snow in all but one of our houses, and they've all worked out. So I'm actually starting to think it's like an omen now. If it snows in our houses,
we're good.
That's good. And yeah, that's happened. We tend to buy, for whatever reason, we'll buy a good deal when a good deal is available. We're not of that mindset that you need to buy at a certain time of year and sell at a certain time of year, because this is what we do full time. In the ordinary course of business, we buy, fix, and flip properties. So we're buying when there's availability, we're selling when things are done. So it seems like in the last 2 years or so, we've been buying a lot of things just before the winter, and we've had it snow in all but one of our houses, and they all wind up working out. So
it all works out in the end, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Gabe, I appreciate all the information. Sure, our listeners do as well. I guess, John, we could leave off with our listeners as far as those maybe that are currently rehabbing. I mean, like myself or someone who's now inspired to engage in this new avenue or strategy. What's really the best way for them to explore this area?
I think just like anything else, it's really the best way is by doing. I mean, I know it's a tough proposition when you're talking about putting hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk, but I started doing cosmetic rehabs just like everybody else. So I did a kitchen and 3 bathrooms and flipped the house, and then an opportunity presented itself. And yeah, I didn't know the first thing about adding a second floor to a house, but you do your due diligence, you run your numbers, you make sure there's some room, and you do it. And you learn as you go. I learn every day. I mean, I bought asbestos last year. I didn't remediate radon. I could give you a list of 100 things I did wrong last year. But that's how you learn. You move forward, and you fail small, fail small, fail often, move forward, and just keep going. There's a lot of stuff, and if anyone ever wants to reach out and to take a look at some of the stuff that we've done, and I'm a really transparent guy, and I'm happy to share what I've learned about what it is that we do. And if someone's really looking at an opportunity, they think there might be more upside to throwing a second floor on something than there would be to just going in and cleaning it up, and they want someone else to take a look. I put a second set of eyes on deals for people all the time. It's just about doing. I mean, we weren't doing ADA levels last year, and here we are doing 4 right now. And we weren't doing new construction this year, and we've got one going already. So it's just evolution. I mean, keep pushing forward, keep learning, keep growing. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're expanding at a good rate. That's excellent. So for any of our listeners that want to get in touch with you, I mean, if there's any programs or any networking events or anything at all, or any way that they can just get in touch with you, or the network or Passionate Deals or whatever it may be, how can they get in touch with you, or
Yeah, you can. Well, we have the site is dasilvagroupinc.com, and you can go there and see what we're up to. We've also just recently started a Learn and Earn program we launched about a month or so ago, where we bring on investors, and in exchange for an investment into a specific project that we're doing, we offer the earn piece, which is obviously interest paid on their investment, and then the learn piece, which is what I'm most excited about, because I'm kind of an academic at heart. I'm a little bit of a geek, and I geek out on this stuff, but I just like the idea of having someone look in over our shoulder and see how it is that we do what we do, invite them out for site visits, kind of let them see our document repository, how we're negotiating with contractors, how we get the terms that we get, what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, all the mistakes I was talking about, the things that I've done wrong, if I had had access to something like this, I could have avoided a lot of those mistakes. And that's tens of thousands of dollars and countless hours of my time that I'd love to get back. And And for whatever reason, it just seems like this is how I learn. Everybody learns differently, but I learn by doing. And I think doing and watching others do and emulating their success is the key to just doing anything, really, to being good at anything anyway.
Excellent. So you said the website was DasilvaInc.com, right?
Dasilva Group Inc. And
Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes, and then your Learn and Earn programs, they'll find information on that site as well, or?
Yeah, everything's linked through there. And then just me personally at gabe.dasilva@gmail.com. I'm happy to field and answer any emails, and I'd love to have anybody out to the sites if they want to see what we're working on, or if they have deals they want someone to put a second set of eyes on. I love that stuff. I geek out on that stuff. So
excellent. That's really generous of you. Gabe, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. We look forward to hopefully having you on in the future.
Thanks for having me on the show, man. It was a pleasure.
Anytime.